Well, we've made it to one of the critical openings against d4, the King's Indian defense. And the line that I'm going to recommend against the King's Indian defense is a bit solid, much like the majority of this repertoire, and it cuts down on the amount of theory that you need to know, which is pretty much the entire point of this simple, quick starter type repertoire. And we'll say that if you want to go for the more aggressive systems from this move order, that's completely fine. This is an alternative. I would recommend this H3 system is quite good these days. And you play for this early G4. And when black plays E5, it's going to be one of those where I want to get my knight out of the way and play F5. I like the H3 G4 systems because it is direct prophylaxis against the natural King's Indian ideas. So kicking things off, this is a more aggressive alternative if you're not interested in the main continuation. So we're just going to recommend knight F3 here, and after castles, now H3. And this is kind of a weird move order, but you're like, well, why are you recommending 5H3? Because I am going to end up playing bishop F4 here. Well, there are many lines with the bishop on F4 where the bishop could be lost. There's some knight H5 stuff, that type of thing. By playing H3, what we're going to see is there's thematic overlap, which is coming up with our Benoni positions, and I wanted to have structural orientation. So we're jumping from the Shigorn in the last video, where we saw knights on F3 and C3, our bishop on F4. Our initial Queen's Gambit video, knights on F3 and C3, bishop on F4. Hopefully you're starting to see if there's a structural overlap in orientation, it makes it easier to remember, easier to play. So that's kind of the goal of this entire series, is giving players something that isn't too difficult to digest and they can just get reasonable positions where they have a slight edge, but they're definitely not worse with white. So coming from here, let's go ahead and talk about, well, what if he goes D5? He's backdooring into a Grunfeld, and we're going to get more into these Grunfeld positions in the next video, but the H3 isn't going to make a tremendous difference from those theoretical lines. We're just going to capture, we're going to take the whole center, we're going to support our center, go Queen D2, Rook C1, and it's a critical idea defending the pawn so we can play D5, because if we play D5 immediately, bishop takes C3 and our queen's going to be lost. So Rook D8 and D5. And like I said, these positions we're going to go over in more detail in the next video, but I was just showing here that the H3 is not going to be a tremendous detriment here by any means. We're still going to get the same structure and same ideas. So now let's go ahead and investigate our Benoni type structures here, because there's going to be this thematic overlap that you need to be aware of. And D6, bishop F4, shut things down with A4, and that's a normal reaction when A6 is played, to play A4 to stop B5 ideas. And we're going to see this structure definitely in when we're covering the Benoni. And I like this idea. I mean, white could play castles and slow play over time. With the traditional Benoni, the E-pawn is, say, missing in a lot of variations for our C-pawn. Just imagine the E-pawn and C-pawn off the board, and you get this type of knight D2, knight C4, so the bishop and knight can focus on the weakness that we've created. Well, in this case, there is no weakness, so we need to change up the plan, and that's what we're seeing E4, and where black is trying to make the B5 break work, we are looking to make things happen in the center. And I mean, Rook E1, E5 at some point comes to mind. But F6 was played, and we get this kind of dynamic position. And I like how black just says, you know what, I'm hunkering down. I completely abandon all plans. Because if white's able to play B4, then it changes the game entirely, where then I can double my rooks up, capture on C5, and I don't even need to work on the king side anymore because I have a clear plan. So black has abandoned all hope of counterplay by playing A5. Now we're going to shore up the position and get rid of our bad bishop. and this is just a squeeze. White's able to even Karpov style dance the king over and then double the rooks on the h-file and just keep on dancing. Just dance all the way to the queen side over here with the king. So now for the main event, and you'll see me harken back quite a lot after bishop f4. This is that beauty of move 5 h3. Knight h5 is nothing. We just drop back to h2 here, and there's no extra theory to know. And if c5, back to d5, and we've already looked at that. So what about knight c6? Well, e3, solid and simple. And knight d7 is that indicator that e5 is coming, but we have nothing to fear from it. And this is probably the most typical type structure you're going to get playing these. Playing specifically, I believe this is the Spassky variation. But what I want you to notice is this overall structure with white is the same structure of the French defense against the King's Indian attack, except this bishop is on h2 instead of c1. And let me go ahead and give you the flip it around, and we'll see this overall structure from this perspective, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about here. Where knight c6, and the thing you don't really worry about in this position is the standard attack. And I've talked about this a few times on the channel, and this is from my aggressive Queen's Gambit decline text on Chessable. It's rook fc8, if h5, h6. They start coming around with the knight. We bring our queen back, queen d2, lining up for the big sacrifice. And the thing about this position is the sacrifice just simply does not work, because no matter how you take, once we get this position, queen f8, and I believe my highest rated win on Lee Chess versus a strong grandmaster was from this position with black. White just made natural moves, went along with the book, and you get in some serious trouble. So keeping this type of position in mind, we're going to jump back to the main game we were looking at here, where with knight c6 and the knight d7 follow-up. So my point with showing that position is that with the bishop on h2, that's actually one more defender compared to when it's on, say, from c1 to b2. And we're even safer than we typically are. And if that position is safe with the King's Indian attack, this one is definitely safe, if not already better for white. So even though black is coming at you and attacking, you need to see this as overextension of black structure and potentially trying too hard to win. So if the center is locked and black is playing on the king side, we should be playing on the queen side, the opposite wing. That's ours. So after knight f6, rook b1, starting to get that space. Both sides are doing the wing thing. And much like with the Benoni, the d6 is the weak point. So we're looking to put some pressure and a lot of variations with this knight c4 plan in conjunction with the bishop on the long h2, b8 diagonal. So d5, knight b5, continuing that same theme here. And white needs to make some progress. So f3, shaking things up a bit as we're getting kicked back on the queen side. And I like how white was able to initiate play on both wings. So we get this type of in-game position where white was able to net the extra space. And I love this move. Oh. After h5, h4, which secures the pawn structure. And white was able to go on to win from here in Barcelona 2014. And we've got Axel Bachmann playing white. And I believe he had an excellent book. It was either Pump Up Your Rating. I think it was Pump Up Your Rating was his book. Or am I thinking of Amateur to IM? Both of those books are fantastic. I know he wrote one of them, but great player who has gradually improved by working hard on his game. And he plays a lot of these solid type positions like we're seeing here in that example game. Definitely a player to take a look at. So bishop f4, knight bd7, e3, again, if c5, d5, and we're transposing right back into our Benoni-esque lines. And if rook e8, this is one of the most common mistakes I see in my students' games. Black tries to hammer through e5 anyway, and what they notice when they get here is, uh-oh, and they lost a pawn for no reason. I always like to propose systems which are very easy for one side to play, and they set traps for natural play for our opponent. Like, I'm not a big fan of, ooh, play this trick, and if the trick doesn't work, we're worse. That's gambling. Not a big fan of that. Play natural, solid positions, which have this poison in them, so to speak. I'd say the main line and the most critical move for black is b6, and this has been recommended in a few King's Indian texts. After bishop e2, bishop b7, I looked at both major moves here, which is castles as well as queen c2, because and both really have drawbacks. If queen c2, black is able to play e5 straight away, and it tactically works here. Whereas, and I felt like black's doing okay in those positions. So I preferred castles, whereas knight e4 is allowed. And we're able to make this trade, and like in, I believe it was Vigorito's King's Indian text, he had a line that ran, say, knight d2, bishop b7, bishop f3, queen c8, bishop takes, queen f3, rook b8, queen takes. And I think this is a Vacchier-Lagrave game from many years ago where black eventually plays b5 after e5 and gets an interesting game. But wanted to recommend not just trading all the pieces down. If you're trying to give black an equal game where he can press, that's a great way to do it. But much better is after takes, bishop h2, let's keep some tension, knight d2, and notice no bishop f3, but queen c2, and we're following a game from Vichugov 2020, I believe Title Tuesday. And white just got a slightly better position, and black's pieces now look a good bit awkward. And I love this next maneuver. Since black's getting space, we just shut it down. So you got a tough choice to make. You either take an EP, or you're letting me lock it down forever, where white's the only one going to be having fun here. I'm going to bring the rook over, I'm going to play f4, and I'm going to slam you. And this is just not going to be fun. And after takes, you have the same kind of idea that I've got the rook swinging over to be able to help with this attack. And I really like this position for white. I think it's interesting. Black definitely could improve, but also I'm not being hypercritical when using the engine here. I want to provide example games and overall memory markers and ideas to help you remember the key plans in this series. So we've only got one more line to cover here. Coming back to our main position, c6 is the most frequently played move in the database, and I'll be honest, I don't see it that often in my students' games compared to b6 or transpositions into the Benoni style structures. So after c6, bishop e2, and he's looking to play b5, so let's play against that. And black's just kind of negotiating the pieces over here. Rook a d1, stopping e5. It doesn't come with tempo anymore. And we have been in no hurry, but this is that critical moment in memory marker. We set up the solid position, and notice black's been having to kind of flail in his own structure. He's got this kind of restricted movement where he wanted to make e5 work, but c5 is this critical move which really gets the ball rolling on opening up the position and taking advantage of the fact that black's pieces are awkward. And again, we're back to the theme of the bishop on the long diagonal doing work. Takes, knight e4, and we get rid of the bishop pair. We're able to slowly improve where the knight is better than the bishop, and white had no problems going into this ending where the extra knight does help tremendously, as we're following a game by Hallart Pearson in 2018. And I'll just finish this game off for you where the knight stops the outside pass pawn. So we just need another one, and it's going to be a girl. The f-pawn's going all the way. And that'll do it for how to play against the King's Indian. So major takeaways: when they're playing this c5 move, play d5. On move 5, h3, again, we're getting our structural orientation of bishop on f4 and pawn on e3. Very, very solid structure. I think it's a very reasonable way to play against the King's Indian where you don't really need to know a lot of theory. It's structure and then a plan or two, and that's it. That's all you need. Yeah,